Today on BeerNet Radio, we are joined by LA Libations founder Danny Stepper. LA Libations is a non-alc beverage producer and incubator that has hatched or helped grow giant new age beverage names like Core Water, Zico Coconut Water, Body Armor, Ariba Chelada, and many more. And also recall Molson Coors took a minority stake in the company late in 2019. So glad to have you, Danny.
Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So Jen, as always, supplied us with a lot of questions. We have our own questions too, but I'll kick one off with one of hers. You know, LA Libations is just an absolute functional beverage powerhouse. So kind of tell us, what is growing fastest in your portfolio? Is it a brand, trends? Where's all the good growth generating?
Yeah. So, by the nature of what we do, everything starts really small. So it's all growing pretty quickly, as you can imagine, because, it's pretty small base. But having said that, everything's niche until it's not. And some things start to evolve and really break out. And in those cases, we kick them out of, the incubator and form our own company around them. But some of the things that are working at the moment, Chamberlain Coffee, which is a coffee we launched with Emma Chamberlain. She's a creator. She's the voice of Gen Z. We just launched it nationwide in Walmart, and the early numbers are mind blowing. And, Walmart's really excited about it because all of a sudden their stores are being mobbed by Gen Z females, which don't normally go there. So that one's interesting. Golden Wing, which we created in partnership with Molson Coors, is really having a moment. We can get into that one a little more later. Zola has had kind of a transition year. We got to 100 million in retail sales really quickly, even though we did a lot of things wrong and we made a lot of mistakes, to be candid. And we've restaged that brand. And so we're now seeing it start to take off again. And the liquid's always been phenomenal, but we got the sugar payload wrong and we corrected that. And the packaging was a little dark and recessive. We got that right now. It's beautiful. So that's really exciting. What else? Cocoa 5 is really interesting. Cocoa 5 is a Chicago-based company. Our partner on it is Devin Booker and Charles Barkley, and it's in the hydration sports drink space. And they had a total viral moment this week.
I saw that.
Yeah, everybody did, and that's been really fun. And just the retailer adoption on that one's been huge. And it's just a great tasting product. If you haven't had the pineapple, you got to taste it. It's amazing. Ariba, continues to just ramp up. We just launched Ariba Fresquita, which is a line extension of the Ariba brand. And that's going to compete with Jarritos, which I know is in a lot of the Anheuser-Busch network. We're basically doing what we did with Body Armor to Gatorade. We're doing, like we did with, Ariba Chelada to Clamato. We're doing it with Ariba Fresquita to Jarritos. So it's a better for you Mexican style soda, which is really interesting. Don't Quit. We just, brought in $10 million from Madison Square Garden and El Catterton. And that one's, our partner is Keurig Dr. Pepper. And that deal predates our relationship with Molson Coors, but obviously Molson gets to go along for the ride on that one. So that one's really exciting. So, they're all in different stages and we only talk about the good ones. I always tell people, everyone always says, Danny, you're killing it. You're a functional powerhouse. And I always say, we only talk about the good stuff. We fail all the time. It's a really hard game. It's a blood sport. So we're really grateful for the ones that do have success. And we've gotten to be a part of a few of those. So it's been pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, Danny, it's funny you say that. It is a blood sport. And one of the things that you said in the past that really stuck with me. And I think it was right when you guys did the deal with Molson Coors. And I think you probably speaking at a Molson Coors distributor meeting. And you said, I just walk down the aisles. I see a popular brand that has, just terrible ingredients. Or a category that's dominated by brand with terrible ingredients, and then you bring functionality to it. And it's been a great formula for you, obviously. Is that still a viable strategy for people that are looking to bring new brands to market, or less so?
100%. So there's really two paths that we go down when we're, creating brands or incubating brands. The first one, I'll use the example of Golden Wing, right? Barley milk. It's a nascent category. needs a lot of consumer education. It takes a long time. It's in a big growing category, which is alternative dairy. But the why of barley, to educate consumers that it tastes better than oat milk. It's got more calcium than oat milk. It's got more vitamin D than oat milk. It's just a better mousetrap. So to educate the consumer on that is a long road, but it's a worthy road, and it's a road that we go down. So that's one path. The other path that you brought up is, disrupting big, huge legacy brands with ingredient problems. A lot of these big brands like Gatorade, were created in the 70s and their ingredient panels haven't changed. So they have artificial colors. Clamato has MSG, for example. So
Hey, don't mess with Clamato's MSG. That's my favorite part about it.
So disrupting those big categories does not take a lot of consumer education. It's just getting the consumer to understand this is a better for you sports drink. This is a better for you chelada. This is a better for you energy drink. It's a much easier connection and it's a much shorter path. And then if you have a creator or celebrity behind it, like we do with DJ, with Zola, that's even more gasoline on the fire. And we should definitely talk about that when you talk about trends in the space. The whole creator piece is really a phenomenon that's going on right now.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to just kind of add briefly on that is it seemed like for a moment in BevAlc, we saw kind of the same thing where people were looking at brands that had terrible ingredients and thought, okay, well, I can take this brand on by coming out with something that is in the same category, but that's better for you. And it seemed like for a while, any innovation that came out had to be, 100 calories or less and this and that. And Jim Cook was talking about Twisted Tea yesterday on their earnings call and said, that's just a brand that is an indulgence. And, when people go after Twisted Tea, for a while, they try to come in with lower calorie stuff and hasn't really put a dent in the sales. With BevAlc, is there still that opportunity to come at these brands dominated by, ingredients that are...
So the answer is yes, but I think you're right. I think it's kind of right sized in that, what's happened in emerging beverages, Whole Foods was blowing up. The idea of, for 100 years in non-alc, it's been about taste and refreshment, right? That was it, right? Coke and a smile. And, then we saw people saying, I want more than taste and refreshment. I want some functionality. So we went through this period of time where people were going to Whole Foods, buying the weirdest thing that you could find, plugging their nose and drinking it because it was good for their gut or whatever. Well, that's kind of evolved and back and swung the other way where the consumer has said, I want it all, right? I want taste. Taste is still king. I want refreshment, but I do want functionality as well. So I think what you just mentioned in Twisted Tea is interesting. And I think the mistake a lot of people have made, and a lot of founders have made, is they come in and they go the complete opposite. So, Body Armor did it perfectly. If you look at Body Armor, and, we sold it for $8 billion, but it nailed it in that Body Armor is still got a lot of sugar, right? Especially the non-light version. It still has a lot of sugar, but it doesn't have artificial colors, right? That was really, it has a coconut water base, an all natural base. And so it is better for you. You could argue, my wife would argue, it's not good for you. Like, do we really want our kids still drinking that? But it is an easy no-brainer choice against Gatorade for my wife, when you're talking about, Body Armor or Gatorade. But, if you go rotate too far and, you're going to sacrifice taste. And what we've learned is the consumer is just not willing to give up taste ever.
That's a good point. We've seen that in the BevAlc world. We've seen that not only with people trying to take on Twisted Tea, but just in the seltzer space. It turns out that full flavor in seltzer is pretty important to the consumer.
And the amazing thing is the sweetener systems these days have come so far. The technology's come so far, at least in non-alc. I can't speak to alc, but you can have it all, right? You can have a better for you version and still make it taste amazing.
What is the latest best sweetener now that's non-caloric or low in
so we went through this phase where stevia was the sugar replacement, and stevia is very polarizing. A lot of people have what we call a stevia tongue, and it creates a dry mouth. And when people have just said, oh, let's take out the sugar and replace it with stevia, that almost never works. It's not a 1-for-1 replacement. So then we saw erythritol come in, and brands like Bai just went to the moon with erythritol. Well, now we're seeing studies with erythritol that, are really raising some eyebrows that this might not be that good for you. A lot of those studies are suspect, to be honest, between us, but they're out there, right? And perception's reality. I would say the ingredient right now is monk fruit. Monk fruit's, very critical, but there's a new one that's evolving, which people don't know about, which is called apple sugar, which is literally sugar just from apples. I'm obsessed with it, it's basically concentrated apple juice as your sweetener. And so you can say no sugar added, even though there's natural sugar from the apple. So that one's really interesting. But the other thing that's working really well is a combination of real cane sugar, a little bit of stevia, and a little bit of erythritol, and people blending all three to get it right and to get the taste right. But to just use something to replace sugar straight away, no one's really done that well.
Well, is there an issue though when you are mixing like three of them? It tastes great, but then how do you communicate that to the consumer? What kind of verbiage can you say? No sugar added, or no this or that? How do you convert that to marketing?
So the good news is consumers now read labels, right? And so they're looking for, grams of sugar. They're looking for artificial colors. They're looking things for like, potassium benzoate. They're trying to get that stuff out of their diets. So that helps. But really the caloric intake is the real communicator, right? So if you're using a blend of just a little bit of cane sugar and monk fruit and stevia, you're going to have a much more lower caloric payload than you would something that's full sugar. And so the consumer, that's really what they care about, is the calories and the sugar.
All right. Go ahead, Jordan.
Well, let's talk about Molson Coors for a little bit. They're a minority owner now. And does the network get first crack at, some of the products in your portfolio, or how does that go about?
So yes and no. I mean, we really don't look at it that way, and it was never set up to be looked at that way. But on something that comes along that deserves national scale on day one, like Zola, we did well over $50 million in year one. That needs a national network. And then, of course, that's going to go to Molson Coors. They're our partner. But as far as everything else that we do, we want to earn our way into the Molson distribution network, right? It doesn't work to try to sell them something. It doesn't work usually when there's day one and there's no trial and awareness on a brand. It's just going to clog them up. It's going to make them say the no the next time you come and knock on their door. So what we're all about is proving concepts outside the network and getting retail authorizations, getting real consumer traction, getting real revenue that we can then get an incoming call from Ray's or Columbia or whoever saying, how come we don't have this yet? And we were like, we've been waiting for your call. It's all yours. Let's go. So that's really how we're setting it up. We don't want to be the guys that are, hey, look, we got all this stuff. Put it in your network. They've got enough of it. They got enough of that going on. And we want them, to have great brands that have real traction and where they can be a good partner, but we're already a good partner and they want us. And that's really the goal. So we don't want to try to build stuff outside the Molson network, with a competing network, but we'll do stuff through KT, we'll do stuff through UNFI, we'll do stuff direct that can be an easy lift and shift to the Molson network if and when it deserves to.
That goes to the question of, among beer wholesalers, there's a lot of talk and there, a little bit of bitterness that, and this is not with LA Libations because you guys obviously have a deal with Molson Coors, but mostly with an energy drink like C4 or famously Monster, who gets built up in the beer network and then it goes, to the strategic buyers network. In your history, what are the benefits and what are the kind of the pain points of a beer network versus, let's say, a Pepsi bottler or KDP bottlers?
So they all have their challenges. So here's the reality. It's just a fact. I'll challenge you to name me $1 billion non-alc brand that has gotten to $1 billion in revenue that's not through a DSD network. I'll just answer your question for you. There is none. Right. So you have to go through a DSD network to get to that, to be that big. The problem is, those networks aren't real great at building brands, and they shouldn't be. Right? That's not their role. That really comes down to the founder and to the brand to build the brand up. And I think the mistake that's been made many times, on the founder side is, you go sign up a big national distributor if you're lucky enough to, and you're like, my work's done here, and that's really when the work starts. Right? So, I think the DSD network's absolutely imperative to get really big, but you cannot count on the DSD network to go out and build your brand. No matter what they say, they all, every meeting I've ever had with a distributor say, we're brand builders. Well, you're really good distributors is what you are, not necessarily brand builders. So I think that's that conundrum and the healthy tension that always exists.
And do you see any distinction from being like, with a certain market, like a beer distributor versus the cola bottler? If you're just kind of focused on off-premise and you're kind of focused maybe on chains, is there any distinction between the performance of the two? Or are they pretty much, if they're both decent, they're pretty much the same?
So my first experience with a non-alc in a beer network was with a brand called Icelandic Glacial, which I started with Jan and Christian, and we put it in the AB network. And back then, getting the beer guys to go down the water aisle was like an act of God. Like, you would not believe how hard it was back then. That's really changed. A lot of the beer networks have gotten much better at non-alc for sure. But at the same time, they're not, you're going to go in and you're going to be priority number 48 for that sales rep that walks into the store, no matter what. And you should be, right? So our constant battle, and I have brands in the Coke system, I have brands in the Keurig Dr. Pepper system, of course, in the Molson Coors network system. Your job as a brand owner in a big network is try to get more share of mind than you deserve, right? Because they should be focused on Miller Lite and Coors Light. That's what keeps the lights on. But to build your brand, you need to get every level of that organization, to the owner of the distributor down to the sales rep and the merchandiser, to thinking about your brand when they walk in the store. Otherwise, they'll merchandise the beer shelf and they're peace out, and they forgot all about the water or the energy section. So that is changing and evolving. It's really starting to evolve in the Molson network. We're seeing it. It was a rough start with Zola, but now we're seeing the distributors really respond. The good news is the economics are phenomenal, right? And if you have the deal built in right, to your point, where the brand's not going to ditch you, right? Like everybody in the Molson networks knows Zola is not going to go somewhere else. So if you're locked in, there's a reason as a distributor to invest in a brand like that. If you don't have that, you might have a little buyout, but you're still at risk of building this big business up and watching it go to someone else.
That's good. Yeah. And let's get into Zola. Is that what you're going to?
Oh, I was going to add real quick, Harry and I were both at the Molson Coors distributor meeting in Nashville in September, and I thought they did a great job of, communicating to distributors. I think they called it Take 5 or something like that. But it was, as soon as you walk into the store, just go hit the non-alc section first, because you're not going to leave the store without checking on beer.
Yep.
So just go in, check out the non-alc, and we know you're going to go check out beer afterwards. But just to,
do it.
Burn that in their brain. Yeah, just
first.
Knock it out.
And it's easy too. It's one or two brands. Just knock it out.
But
yeah, I think that was the brainchild of Kevin Nitz, and it's starting to really catch on. And I was at that meeting as well. And I think just the idea of, and this is where I love Molson Coors, is unlike a lot of the other strategics, that I've worked with over the years, is they're very transparent. They're very real. And, at that meeting, they just were very candid. They said, hey, we made some mistakes with Zola, right? They didn't just go in and say, hey, this is the rosiest thing on the planet, even though it's big. I mean, not anymore because Prime came along, but before Prime, Zola was the fastest growing non-alc brand in year 1 and year 2 that I've ever seen, ever. Prime's now surpassed that. And we still made a bunch of mistakes. And instead of Molson getting up in front of the network saying, we're the greatest, we're the best, the humility that came out in that meeting, which I saw, and I hope that you saw it too, was, look, there's some things that we did right. This is clearly a category that we're playing in. We're learning. We're going to get better. We're not afraid to tweak and pivot, which is the key to emerging brands. Like, show me a founder that thinks their brand is done, and I will tell you they're literally done. Like, you're never done with your formula. You're never done with your packaging. You're constantly getting consumer feedback, distributor feedback, retailer feedback, and you're implementing those learnings and tweaking and changing. If you saw Body Armor the first day or Vitamin Water the first day that it launched to the day that it sold to the Coca-Cola company, unrecognizable. You would not recognize it. So for anyone to say that they've got it figured out and their brand is done and they nailed it, I'll show you a failure that's just about to happen.
Yeah. And so, like you said, Zola, huge start. It is a big brand, but it's a work in progress. So you've changed the packaging, you've changed the formulation. What's next for Zola? How does that manifest itself in the marketplace?
So we didn't change. So we launched 10 SKUs originally, 5 of which had 100 calories and sugar. The big learning was that was not the big idea. Those have now been discontinued. Of the other 5 SKUs, I think 2 of them stuck, and we've upgraded with 3 other SKUs. We went from a 16-ounce black monster type looking can to a 12-ounce, very bright, energetic, with that, it screams health and wellness. So I think, like I said, we're not done. We're never done. But I think from where it was to where it is now has been an incredible pivot. But those pivots are painful. And especially when you open up on Broadway. I mean, usually with our stuff, we test it small in a market, work out all those kinks, make changes, pivots, and then scale. When you have The Rock, you can't really do that. Right. So we went out on Broadway, broke our own rule. And so when you now have to make the pivots and tweaks, it's hard. It's painful. You really have to go out and explain to your distribution partners, to your retail partners, what's going on. Thank goodness we have amazing relationships with the retailers. Molson has amazing relationships with their distributors, and they all stuck it out with us. And now they're starting to see the benefits of that. It was just hard because we started so big, so fast. And it's like turning the aircraft carrier like a speedboat.
Right. And, it's not just Zola. It's emblematic of the entire energy drink space that has kind of pivoted from a big black monster can down to more of a Celsius, less aggressive, more health and wellness oriented type beverage. You just see it.
Well, the thing that we're constantly reminding distributors and retailers is everyone has really short memories, right? Like really short memories. Like Celsius is the pretty girl at the party right now, right? But look, I bought their stock right when COVID hit, when it was $5 a share, and it went up to $10 a share, and I sold it like an idiot. Now today it's like a $9 billion valuation. But so everybody's like, yeah, Celsius is rocking. It's the greatest thing ever. It's like, okay, what about in year 5? What about in year 10? What about in year 15 where it did nothing? Literally nothing. It couldn't even tie Zoa's shoes where Zoa is today in year 15. And then it took off, right? And to Celsius's, credit, they had investors that stayed with them, but they kept tweaking, kept changed their brand positioning, changed their packaging, till they got it right. And then it goes. And we see that time and time again. It never happens on the first try, second try, third try, fourth try. It's constantly an evolution till you get it right, until you have a moment like that.
Yeah. I saw on Twitter, somebody put the original Celsius packaging.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Like maybe at the time that kind of stuff played, but it looks like
at the time it didn't play, by the way. It didn't.
Yeah, it did. Obviously it didn't. In hindsight, that's interesting. So anything else, Jordan, that we're leaving out?
I know Jen wanted to ask about the 4 Sixes brand. Y'all helped create that with some of the Yellowstone people. I think it's beer, RTDs, whiskey, more. What can you tell us about that brand? How's it doing? And I think we've heard through the grapevine that may be going through some AB wholesalers. So what can you share on all that?
Yeah, so I just got back from the ranch with Taylor and David, who are my friends for a long time since I was making movies years ago. And that one kind of came up. So, we match made the Topo Chico hard seltzer deal between Coke and Molson. We were the center of that and put that together. And so, obviously when Taylor and David bought the ranch 4 6s, they thought it would be really interesting to create a brand. And to be honest, LA Libations is we have a significant minority stake in the brand, and therefore Molson Coors has a significant minority stake in the brand. But on the day-to-day, we're not real active in it. It has its own company that's really working on it. Our world is really non-alc. That's really what we're focused on. By the way, that's what I want my company focused on, and that's what Molson wants my company focused on. But having said that, there's real momentum on that brand. It was launched in Texas. You'd be hard pressed to go anywhere in Texas and not see it right now, on premise and off premise. And now it's scaling nationwide. Someone just sent me a purchase order from Save Martin South in California for like 35,000 cases or something. So there's like major traction coming on, and the RTD cocktails is really, I think, the big idea for that brand, even bigger than the beer. And that's just starting to happen. But, I think there's like 30 people in that company now working on that brand. And there's big hopes and ambitions, but we're kind of on the periphery at this point. We put it all together. And for that, we have a really nice stake in it. But, that's not what we go to bed and wake up every morning thinking about.
Right. Got it. Okay. Well, any any predictions in the non-alc space? What's next? And
So are you guys tracking Prime? I mean, you can't have a podcast on non-alc and not talk about Prime. Are you guys?
Yeah, well, let's talk about Logan Paul. He doesn't get enough press.
So it is an unbelievable phenomenon like we've never seen. In my neighborhood this weekend, there was not a lemonade stand. There was a Prime stand with a line of kids, like trying to buy Prime for $6 a bottle. And, I was talking to Bob Gangor, the CEO of Keurig Dr. Pepper, and he goes, dude, you can't find this stuff in a lot of places. And if you're lucky enough to buy it on Amazon, it's at $12 a bottle. And it's really phenomenon. In less than a year, they're at about an 8% market share in sports drinks or hydration, or whatever you want to call it. And it took us, 7 years to do that with Body Armor. The question is, does it have staying power? And do all these creator brands have staying power? And it feels a little gold rushy, I think, to a lot of us. I'm just trying not to be like that old guy that's saying, that's not going to happen, But you never know, like things that go up that fast usually come down that fast, it feels like. But it's a phenomenon, and it's really got traction. And the same thing's happening with Mr. Beast with his candy bars. In Walmart, it's outselling Hershey and Milky Way. And, the one thing, the real big shift that we're seeing, and I want to stay away from the whole Bud Light thing. I don't even want to go in there. But the one thing that we're seeing is consumers, there's been a massive shift that's now coming into real focus where consumers don't trust companies anymore. They trust creators and influencers. And, we all know, we've all seen that movie before. We all saw what happened with Jared at Subway. We all seen that movie before. If something goes wrong, it can get really ugly. But what's amazing, like we're in business with Emma Chamberlain, who is literally the voice of Gen Z. She started this coffee company, and we put it into Walmart 2 weeks ago. The numbers are literally off the charts, and it's blowing all of our minds, including Walmart, including us, everybody. And the reason is because there's Gen Z females going in droves to Walmart, which they've never done, right? So from a Walmart lens, you're like, wow, I'm tapping into this audience that trusts Emma, and Emma's telling them to go to a retailer that they don't normally shop at. Right. They don't shop at all. They're young, right? Their parents shop, whatever. And they're going in there and buying it to the tune of huge numbers that are like grabbing market share from Starbucks and Super Coffee. It's really incredible to see what happens. And, and the way she supported that brand is incredible. I mean, just the class, the partnership, she'll call the Walmart buyer and all the time, like it's her brand. She's the founder. is really phenomenal. It's really interesting. So it's hard to talk about, what's going in non-alc without acknowledging that. The question is, how long will all that last? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean that is the big question, because like you said, pinning everything on one person like Subway did, or cacti with Travis Scott, and Logan Paul. I mean, obviously he has a massive young male following, but I don't know if you want to base your business. I mean, Logan Paul, he's controversial. He just seems to make him bigger and bigger, but it is a risk. But you're right. I don't know how you can compete against Mr. Beast. I mean, what is there anybody bigger than me? You know how many Super Bowls you'd have to watch to get the count up to what Mr. Beast gets? Yeah.
I was at the Super Bowl with Mr. Beast. It's funny you say that, but the thing about Mr. Beast is he is way, way up here. Like, everyone thinks there's all these creators and they're all huge and they're all equal. Mr. Beast is so far above them all. Emma Chamberlain is right below him.
Right.
Logan Paul, everyone else, all of them are way down here, in terms of audience.
Right. So, and you've been to the Super Bowl with Jimmy. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, we were there together. Yeah.
Like, just a genuinely cool, nice guy. Is that your impression?
He's totally cool. He's 24 years old and very smart, strategic, and things like what he's done do not happen on accident. There's definitely something under the hood there to have that kind of success. It's not just pointing a cell phone at yourself and, it doesn't work like that. Everything is so strategic and thought out and really well done. And he's a good person, and he's done so much philanthropy, I guess is the word. So, so I think that one's really interesting.
Yeah, boy. I mean, the guy can't be stopped. And everybody says, how do you do it? He goes, I just try to make good videos and I try to make them better every time I do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing.
Yep.
Seems
that's incredible.
I mean, good Lord.
Yeah.
Do you ever talk to Mike Rapoli anymore?
Yeah. I mean, I don't talk to him, super often, but he is my, idol, my coach, my mentor. I would talk to him every second of every day if I could, because every time I talk to him, I'm like a sponge. I learn so much from him. He's the GOAT. I mean, there's no one like him that's ever been and probably never will be again. I mean, he did it twice, And, when we got involved with Body Armor, he told me, he goes, we sold vitamin water for 4.1. He goes, my goal is to double it by this date. And he doubled it by that almost on the day when Coke bought it for $8 billion. He's a beast.
My wife's cousin trains his horses, Todd Bletcher. And so I've got to meet Mike. And I've never seen anybody talk so fast and so intelligently about the business.
He's got a big weekend coming. I'll probably see him at the Kentucky Derby this weekend. But he's got some big races coming up here in the Derby. So.
Oh yeah. Well, good. Well, listen, gosh, unless you got any.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, Danny.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It's very, very good information for our listeners, and I appreciate it. And are you going to say you're going to be at the Derby this weekend?
Yeah. We're going to head over to Beverage Forum and then head out that way.
Cool.
Nice.
All right.
Enjoy it.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.